The sun hung low over Ouagadougou, casting a golden glow across the dusty streets. The air was thick with the scent of roasted maize and the hum of a city alive with purpose. In the heart of Burkina Faso's capital, a modest government building buzzed with anticipation. Journalists from across the continent and beyond crowded into a small conference room, their cameras flashing, their notepads ready. They'd come to hear Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso, respond to a message that had set Africa ablaze with anger. Days earlier, a leaked recording had surfaced, allegedly from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. In it, he purportedly warned African leaders to stay in line or face consequences. The words were vague but menacing, a thinly veiled threat that echoed the arrogance of centuries past. Whether the recording was genuine or not, it didn't matter. The message had struck a nerve, reigniting old wounds of colonialism and exploitation. Africa was tired of being spoken to like a child. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the podium, his face a masked resolve. At 37, he was one of the youngest leaders in Africa, a former military captain who had risen to power in a wave of populist fervor. His dark eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of his people, the journalists, and the foreign correspondents who had come expecting a carefully worded diplomatic response. They were about to be disappointed. "I speak today not just as a president of Burkina Faso," Ibrahim began, his voice steady but charged with fire, "but as a son of Africa. For too long, our continent has been treated as a playground for foreign powers. They have taken our gold, our diamonds, our oil. They have drawn lines on our maps, divided our people, and dictated our futures. And now, they think they can threaten us into submission." The room fell silent. Ibrahim leaned forward, his hands gripping the podium. "Let me be clear to Mr. Netanyahu and anyone else who thinks they can bully Africa. We are not your colony. We are not your pawns. We are sovereign nations, and we will fight for our freedom with everything we have." The silence broke. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, followed by a burst of applause from the Burkinabe in the room. Journalists scribbled furiously, their pens racing to capture the moment. Ibrahim's words were not just a speech. They were a declaration of war against centuries of subjugation. "I say this to Tel Aviv, to Washington, to Paris, to anyone who thinks they can control us," he continued. "Burkina Faso does not answer to you. Africa does not answer to you. If you come for one of us, you come for all of us." The speech lasted only 10 minutes, but its impact was seismic. By evening, clips of Ibrahim's address were flooding social media platforms. X, Telegram, WhatsApp. Hashtags like hashtag Africa will not bow and hashtag We stand with Traore began trending across the continent. In Mali, young people gathered in Bamako streets, chanting his words. In Niger, farmers shared a video on their phones, nodding in agreement. In South Africa, activists posted messages of solidarity, calling Ibrahim a voice for the voiceless. Ibrahim hadn't planned to become a symbol. He was a soldier, not a poet. But as he left the podium that day, he felt the weight of something greater than himself. Africa was waking up, and he was its spark. In the weeks that followed, Ibrahim's speech became more than a moment. It became a movement. Across the Sahel, leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso had already been forging a quiet alliance, a pact to protect their sovereignty and resources. They call it the Sahel Alliance, a coalition built on the belief that Africa could stand on its own. Ibrahim's words in Ouagadougou gave a new urgency, a rallying cry that echoed beyond their borders. In Bamako, Colonel Assimi Goïta, Mali's leader, invited Ibrahim for a summit. The two men, both young and battle-hardened, shared a vision in Africa free from foreign interference. Over cups of strong tea in a modest government office, they laid out plans to strengthen their alliance. Niger's leader, General Abdourahmane Tiani, joined them via secure video call, his face grim but determined. "We push France out," Assimi said, his voice low. "No more bases, no more economic chokeholds. But they're not done with us. They'll use sanctions, proxies, anything to keep us weak." Ibrahim nodded. "And it's not just France. Israel, the US, China, they all want a piece of us. They think we're still the same Africa they carved up a century ago." Tiani's voice crackled through the screen. then we show them we're not. The Sahel Alliance isn't just about defense. It's about building something new. Schools, hospitals, economies that serve our people, not theirs. The three leaders agreed to deepen their partnership. They would share intelligence, coordinate trade policies, and invest in local industries. No more would their uranium, gold, or oil flow to foreign capitals while their people starved. They would build a Sahel that stood tall, a model for the rest of Africa. Back in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim worked tirelessly to turn words into action. He met with local farmers, promising to protect their land from foreign corporations. He visited schools, vowing to teach children their own history, not the sanitized versions written by colonial powers. And he spoke to the youth, the hard Burkina Faso, urging them to dream big. One evening, as he walked through a bustling market, a young woman approached him. Her name was Aissata, a university student with fire in her eyes. "Mr. President," she said, clutching a phone that still displayed a speech. "You've given us hope. But what happens next? How do we fight?" Ibrahim smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We fight by building, by learning, by standing together. You're the future, Aissata. Don't wait for permission, take it." Aissata's question stayed with him. The Sahel Alliance was a start, but it wasn't enough. Africa needed more than a regional pact. It needed a continental awakening. Ibrahim began reaching out to other leaders, from Senegal to Kenya, from Algeria to Zimbabwe. Some were skeptical, accustomed to the old ways of diplomacy and compromise. But others, especially the younger ones, listened. They saw in Ibrahim a reflection of their own frustrations, their own dreams. As the Sahel Alliance grew, so did the movement Ibrahim had sparked. His speech had reached far beyond Africa's borders, resonating with the diaspora in Europe, the Americas, and beyond. In London, African students organized rallies, chanting, "Africa will not bow." In New York, activists held vigils, demanding an end to foreign meddling. Even in Tel Aviv, a small group of protesters gathered outside the government offices, holding signs that read, "Africa is not your enemy." But not everyone was inspired. In Western capitals, Ibrahim's words were met with unease. The U.S. State Department issued a vague statement about promoting stability in Africa. France, still stinging from its expulsion from the Sahel, tightened sanctions on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And in Israel, though the government remained silent, rumors swirled of plans to counter Ibrahim's influence. Diplomatic pressure, economic threats, perhaps even covert operations. Ibrahim knew the risks. He had seen what happened to leaders who challenged the global order. Thomas Sankara, his own hero, assassinated in 1987 for daring to dream of a free Burkina Faso. But Ibrahim was not afraid. "If we die fighting for our people," he told his advisors, "then we die free." One night, as he worked late in his office, a call came from Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, Guinea's leader. "Ibrahim," Mamadi said, his voice urgent, "they're coming for you. I've heard whispers, sanctions may be worse. They want to make an example of you." Ibrahim leaned back in his chair, staring out at the Ouagadougou skyline. "Let them try," he said. "If they think they can silence us, they're in for a surprise." The next morning, Ibrahim announced a new initiative, the African Unity Summit. It would be held in Ouagadougou, a gathering of leaders, activists, and citizens from across the continent. The goal was simple but audacious, to draft a charter for a new Africa, one that prioritized sovereignty, unity, and self-reliance. Invitations went out to every African nation, and to the surprise of many, responses poured in. Leaders from Ghana, Ethiopia, and Nigeria confirmed their attendance. Even smaller nations like the Gambia and Rwanda sent representatives. The summit was set for 3 months later, but preparations began immediately. Ibrahim's team worked around the clock, transforming Ouagadougou into a stage for Africa's rebirth. Billboards went up proclaiming Africa Rising. Schools and universities organized debates and forums, discussing what sovereignty truly meant. And across the continent, ordinary people began to believe that change was possible. The African Unity Summit dawned on a bright October morning. Ouagadougou was alive with color. Flags from every African nation lined the streets, and traditional drummers welcomed delegates with rhythms that echoed the continent's heartbeat. Over 50 nations sent representatives, from presidents to grassroots activists. The air was electric with possibility. Ibrahim opened the summit with a speech that would be remembered for generations. Standing before a crowd of thousands, with millions more watching online, he spoke of Africa's past, present, and future. Our ancestors fought for freedom, he said, his voice carrying over crowd. They fought with spears, with words, with dreams. They won us independence, but the battle was never finished. Today, we face a new kind of colonialism, not with chains, but with sanctions, with threats, with economic traps. But we are not the Africa of yesterday. We are rising, and we will not bow. The crowd erupted, their cheers shaking the ground. Over the next 3 days, delegates debated, argued, and dreamed. They drafted the African Unity Charter, a document that called for economic independence, military cooperation, and cultural pride. It demanded an end to foreign military bases, fair trade agreements, and the right to control Africa's resources. It was bold, uncompromising, and revolutionary. But the summit was not without tension. Some leaders, wary of antagonizing global powers, urged caution. Others, emboldened by Ibrahim's courage, pushed for radical change. In private meetings, Ibrahim mediated, listened, and persuaded. He knew unity was fragile, but he also knew it was their greatest strength. On the final day, as the charter was signed, a young Ethiopian activist named Selam stood to speak. "This is not just a document," she said, holding up the charter. "This is a promise to our children, to our ancestors, to ourselves. We will not let Africa be a pawn any longer." The crowd rose in a standing ovation, and Ibrahim felt tears prick his eyes. This was what it fought for, not just for Burkina Faso, but for every African who had ever been told they were less than, every child who deserved a future free from fear. The summit's success sent shockwaves around the world. The African Unity Charter was a direct challenge to the global order, and the response was swift. Western media downplayed the event, framing it as a regional gathering with little significance. But behind closed doors, the reaction was different. Sanctions tightened on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Trade deals were canceled, and rumors of covert operations grew louder. Ibrahim knew the fight was far from over. One evening, as he walked through Ouagadougou streets, he saw a mural painted on a wall, a lion, fierce and proud, with the words "Africa rising" beneath it. He smiled, knowing that no sanction, no threat, could extinguish the fire he had lit. Back in his office, he received a message from Aissata, the student he had met in the market. She had organized a youth movement, mobilizing thousands of young people to support the Sahel Alliance and the Unity Charter. "We're with you, Mr. President." Her message read, "Africa is awake." Ibrahim leaned back, his heart full. The road ahead would be hard. There would be betrayals, setbacks, and battles. But for the first time in centuries, Africa was writing its own story. And Ibrahim Traoré, the soldier from Burkina Faso, was its voice. The world would learn soon enough, Africa would not bow.